What's up everyone, welcome to a brand new tutorial from Kany's Arts. My name is Shanak Patwardhan, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to create a stop motion intro with cutout pieces in After Effects. No third-party plugins are used in this tutorial, so let's get right into it. Alright, once you're in After Effects, go to Composition, New Comp. Full HD at 30 FPS is cool. Let's call this Placeholder Comp. Press OK. Now you can either add your logo or text or anything you want in here. I'm just gonna add some text here just for the sake of this tutorial. Let's call it Stop Motion. Yeah, that's what we're doing right now. By the way, this font is pretty cool. It's called Subscriber, just in case if you want to search for it. So the placeholder comp, drag it to a new composition, and let's call this Logo with Texture Composition. So now we need to create a new texture composition. Create a new composition, press OK. Rename this to Texture Matte. And let's import a texture file here. I got this texture from pexels.com. It's there in the name of the file as well. Drag and drop the texture file to your composition, and make sure that the texture covers the entire frame of this composition. Okay, go to the logo with texture comp and drag and drop the texture matte under the placeholder comp. Make sure it's under the placeholder comp. And let's give this an alpha matte. It's in this track matte option. You'll see alpha matte. By the way, just in case if you don't see these options, you can access them via this toggle switches and modes option, or you can press the F4 key on your keyboard, which basically does the same thing. So go here and change this to alpha matte. Now we have this texture on our text, which looks pretty good, but we're just getting started. The logo with texture comp. Now I'm going to use the shatter effect on the logo with texture comp, but before that I need to extend the boundaries of that layer, keeping the size of the logo at the same scale. If you don't understand what I mean, I'll explain it in a bit. Drag and drop it to a new composition. Let's call this Canvas Extended. Okay, and this composition is going to be 4K, which is basically double of this. It'll be a 3840 by 2160. But just in case if you don't know or remember those figures, there's a small trick in After Effects. If you want to change the size of the current composition to twice its current size, you can just multiply any of these values by 2. Make sure that the lock aspect ratio is selected, so it affects both the values when you change one of these. Now if I press OK, the composition is going to rescale to 4K composition. And if you see the properties of this composition, you'll see here 3840 by 2160. We need to add the shatter effect to this composition, but we cannot add it here, so I'm gonna pre-comp this again. Canvas Extended, drag it to a new composition, and let's change the name of this composition to Shatter Comp. Okay, so let's start by adding the shatter effect. Select the layer in your shatter comp, go to Effect, Simulation, Shatter. Okay, let's start altering some of these properties. The view will be rendered. I'm gonna move to a non-zero keyframe just to see what's going on here. The shape, the pattern will be glass. And the repetitions, quite a lot. Yeah, that looks nice. Okay, and the extrusion depth, I don't really want any extrusion depth because this is more of a paper or maybe a thicker paper, like a magazine cover thingy. So yeah, no extrusion depth there. Go to the force 1 and let's animate the position and the radius. Let's start from the frame 0 and I'm gonna keyframe both of these properties. And for the position, I'm gonna move the anchor point to somewhere over here. Okay, somewhere like that. And the radius at the first frame can be very less, 0.06, something like that. Then let's go to like a couple of seconds ahead and add another keyframe. Press U to reveal the keyframe properties of your layer. And here for the position, I'm gonna change the position on this to somewhere over here, and the radius here will be 0.15. Too strong, 0.14. Okay, this is basically just the half part of the logo. Again, I'll go a second or two forward in the timeline. I'm again going to change the position to somewhere over here, and the radius here will be 3.14. That's pi, guys, the value of pi. Yeah, science involved in this stuff. I'm just kidding. Okay, so yeah, that looks cool. The entire logo is being shattered here. Go to the physics drop down, and here the tumble axis will be XY. The randomness can be 0.38. The viscosity will be 0.33. I want it to be pretty viscous. And the mass variance can be 50. The gravity, I definitely do not want any gravity on this. No falling down. So it looks somewhat like this. We have shattered some of these pieces, and this is what I was talking about. Since I want these pieces to look like they're laid on a table or something, I didn't want the pieces to go outside of the frame. If we had not changed the size of this composition to a 4K composition, and I'll just draw an approximate square or rectangle to show you what it would have been like. So hopefully this is like half of the area of the entire composition. So what you can see is that the pieces go outside of this composition. That is why I had to extend the boundaries of this composition. Let's delete this shape layer. Don't really need it. Okay, so now this thing is shattered. Let's add some fun effects to this. Drag the shattered comp again to a new composition. And I'm again going to change this back to a normal 1920 by 1080 comp. You can, by the way, you can even divide this. This takes all the math operations, so you can either divide this by 2 to convert this to a 1920 by 1080 comp, or you can just type in the values. It's up to you. So, you know, who needs a calculator when we have After Effects, right? Next time you don't have a calculator handy, just use After Effects. I'm gonna reduce the size of this a little bit, quite a bit actually. And okay, let's get to the fun stuff now. I'm gonna add an adjustment layer here. I'm gonna add a bit of a wiggle in the text just so that it doesn't look so stationary and lifeless. Kind of think it'll look interesting with a little bit of action going on there. So the adjustment layer, go to Effect, Distort, and go to Turbulent Displace. Okay, so the displacement will be turbulent, that's fine. The amount will be 15 and the size will be 8. I just want a little bit of... Oh, I forgot one thing. First of all, we need these pieces not to shatter outside, but we need these to kind of come back together. So click on the layer, right click on it, and go to Time and Time Reverse Layer. So now the pieces are kind of coming together instead of shattering. Yeah, forgot this step. Go back to the Turbulent Displace layer. For the evolution, I'm gonna give this a quick time expression. Multiply time by 1000 here. And it's always a good habit to end the expressions with a semicolon, so that's what I'm gonna do. And let's see, what does this look like. Just need to see the end part of this. These pieces are staying put for a long time before they start moving, so I'm gonna remap. I'm gonna add a time remap to this layer and move it a little bit backward and extend the layer a little bit so that we get a little bit of a stay at the end of this. I'm gonna scale this a little bit. I'm gonna rename the shatter comp to noise comp because we just added noise. Oh, that is nice. Noise comp. Now this looks good in itself, but it looks a bit too plain, so let's add a little bit of distorted outline to this so that it doesn't look as flat. Again, drag the noise comp to a new composition and let's call this main comp. Finally, we are here. Let's again drag the noise comp to a new composition and let's call this an outline comp. And in this one, I need the outline of all of these pieces as a separate element. In the outline composition, go to effects and presets and search for find edges. I don't really need the edges to form from the RGB values of these pieces. I need them to form only from the alpha channel. So to do that, add a fill effect to this and drag and drop the fill effect above the find edges effect, and the fill can be any color, it doesn't really matter right now. For the find edges effect, let's invert it so we have a nice edge, but if you see the alpha of this, it still has the black portion in the middle. Let's give it a linear color key and key out the black. So we have these nice edges. If you see it in full resolution, they look somewhat like this. That's cool. And so to change the color of this, I'm gonna add another fill. I can just duplicate this fill and drag and drop it at the end of this and change it to black. Go to the main composition and let's also add a background to this. Create a new composition. Let's call it background. BG texture. Import another texture and I'm going to drag and drop it here and I'm going to rotate it so that fits the composition perfectly, and go to the main composition and drag your BG texture as well as the outline composition. The BG texture will obviously go below everything and the outline will be above the noise composition. Now let's change both of these to multiply. Just adds a little bit of a character to this and makes the colors pop a little bit, especially since the texture also has a little bit of a saturation on it. Now convert all these layers to 3D layers and let's add a camera to this one. Also, I'm gonna add a null so that I can parent the camera to the null, because I don't generally like to animate the camera by itself. It's kind of a complicated thing. So okay, parent the camera to the null, make sure the null is a 3D layer, and I'm gonna lock the camera just so that I don't accidentally select it or something. Okay, let's preview this in full resolution since it looks kind of garbage in quarter resolution. For the noise comp, I'm gonna add a little bit of a drop shadow to this. Okay, the default is fine, I like it. And now let's add some cool effects to this. Drag and drop your adjustment layer and convert it to an adjustment layer first. And let's add a brightness contrast to this. I'm going to animate the brightness and contrast both with a wiggle expression. So it'll be wiggle 30 and 30. And I'm just gonna copy the same expression and add it to the contrast as well. Since this is supposed to look like a stop motion animation, which it currently does not, we need to reduce the frame rate of this composition to a much lower value. We could have created the file at a lower frame rate right from the beginning, but sometimes when you've been dealing with frame rates of say 25, 30 or even 60 in some cases, it can be difficult to work with a frame rate which is much lower, like 6 or 8 or something. You're too used to creating animations keeping the higher frame rates in mind. Your mind kind of adjusts itself to making keyframes with so many frames in mind. So yeah, and plus After Effects lets us do this, so why the heck not? Let's do it. Okay, so drop in another adjustment layer. Let's call the first one CC and the new one FPS, because I'm gonna reduce it. And let's add the posterize time effect on this and change the frame rate to 6. Now I'm also going to add a little bit of a wiggle on the camera null, but before that I'm going to zoom in a little bit so that the boundaries don't get cut on this. So open up the position property of the camera and add a wiggle expression here as well, and it'll be wiggle 10, 5. Also on the rotation, on the Z rotation of the null, I'm gonna add another wiggle expression, and this time it'll be 2 and 3. The frequency and amplitude respectively will be 2 and 3. Ooh, that is a bit too much. Okay, maybe the amplitude can be 1, and also the frequency can be 1. Yeah, that's kind of cool. Now some of these parts can get blurred while you're shooting these things. It kind of looks interesting. So add another adjustment layer and make sure that this layer is below the FPS layer, and I'm gonna change this to an adjustment layer, and let's add a blur animation on this. So I'm gonna call this focus and add a fast blur to this. Not fat blur, fast blur. And I'm just gonna randomly add some blurriness to this at different parts, maybe 10, and again this can drop to 0. And these keyframes can be hold keyframes because I don't want the blur to animate over time, and I'm just copying and randomly pasting the blur in places. And make sure that the blur doesn't last too long or it'll kind of ruin the effect. Just a little bit of a blur in some places. Now another thing, I want to blur the edges of this so that the focus is in the dead center of this. So add another adjustment layer. You can drop it below the focus layer, change it to another adjustment layer, and I'm going to double click on the ellipse tool so that adds some mask, and I'm going to add a Gaussian blur on this and change the blurriness to 20, and in the mask properties I'm going to change this to subtract and the feather to 500 pixels. Somewhat a very gradual transition, and the mask opacity can be a little bit lesser because I don't want the blur to be as strong. Let's call this blur vignette. Okay, I think we're almost done. Maybe we can add a little bit of noise to this, just a very final touch. Add the default noise and change the value to 5%. And if you preview this now, our animation is ready. And that's the end of the tutorial. If you liked it, please like the video as well and share it. And if you have any doubts or suggestions, do write them in the comment section. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please consider doing that as well. Until the next time, Shaunak over and out.